Welcome to the Lifescript Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sonu. The Lifescript Podcast is on a mission to uncover what health truly means and give insight into my unique, evidence-based health philosophy I call your Lifescript. The Lifescript Podcast aims to empower you with thought-provoking discussions with leading medical professionals and wellness experts and how it ties into your Lifescript. Together, we discuss the rapid rise of chronic diseases and mental health conditions and how our lifestyle, our emotional health, and the core medicine all intertwines to give you the best health for life. Please be aware that this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide individualized medical advice for any health conditions. If you're seeking tailored support, you can explore more on my website, drsonu.com.au. That's drsonu.com.au. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, this is Dr. Sonu, and welcome to the podcast, Your Lifescript. Today, I want to talk about the most important component of my Lifescript wheel, and that's food, nutrition. Often patients say to me, what should we eat, Dr. Sonu? And when I explain to them, they are so amazed by how simple our food philosophy needs to be. So let's talk about the food philosophy. I call it a philosophy because it's not one size fits all. We all have different tastes. We all have different access to foods, ingredients. In some seasons, you may get something which you may not get in another season. So it's about the concept rather than exactly what you're eating. So if I had to summarize essentially what is good food for you, what is the best food for you, what is the food that makes you live longer, that keeps your gut microbiomes, the little bacteria in our gut happy, I would say it's whole foods, just whole foods like nature intended it. A mango is a mango. You don't have to read ingredients on a mango. You do have to read the ingredients from a packet of a cereal or a protein bar, and sometimes we don't even recognize what some of those things are. So the likelihood is if you don't recognize an ingredient, it's probably not even a food. So essentially, the food philosophy should be to eat whole foods like nature makes them in its purest form. So vegetables, fruits, whole grain, non-processed food should form the biggest part of our diet. Now, a lot of people say, is vegan better? Should I go vegan? Should I be vegetarian? Can I never eat, meat, but I love meat? So there's so many confusing concepts around food. It totally bewilders me that we have made food into such an enigma when it doesn't need to be. So if I give you the first concept, it's about your food philosophy. So what is your food philosophy? So number one we talked about is eating food the way nature makes it. So whole foods without processing it. So to give you an example, whole grain or brown rice is brown rice and it is in the whole form. So it is a whole food and it's good for you. When you start processing it, when you make brown rice into white rice, you've taken away the nutritious coating of the rice, and it decreases the nutrition value of the food. In fact, there's a study that proves that eating white rice can increase your risk of breast cancer, whereas when you eat brown rice, it decreases your risk of breast cancer. So processing a food can have very detrimental effects on what it does to your body. Now that rice, the white rice, then you can process further. You can make it into rice flour, then you can process into rice crackers, and so on. The list goes on. So the more you change the original context of a food, the more you process it, the less nutrition value it has. So the first and foremost concept is to eat food in its whole form, not in the form that it's processed. Sadly, though, the diet in our world, in the Western society, especially in Australia, America, is becoming 60 to 70% of our diet is processed. So we eat lots of flour-based meals, pastas, breads, processed. So it's not in the form that the whole grain was. So we lose so much of the nutritional value of the food. And it's not about just the calories in them. It's about the actual nutritional content of this food. So the calories can be empty. So we're so used to, in the modern world, counting calories. Weight loss is the number one priority for many people, but they don't look at it from a health point of view. Weight loss usually is one of the components of the health benefits of eating a good diet. So coming back, the first and foremost concept is eating whole foods. So, I tell little kids in my clinic to the 90-year-olds, and I say, okay, what are you eating, And when they tell me, it's sometimes very sad that so many people are eating only processed food. I had a 70-year-old diabetic man in my clinic who said, well, I ate corned beef from a tin, then I ate some fruit from a tin, and then a low-fat ice cream and a low-fat jelly. So, he knows he's diabetic, so he's accessing food that he can easily, open from packets and tins and create a meal for himself. But all of that food has got very little nutritional value for him. And even though it says low fat or low sugar, it's got the tick, it's diabetic friendly, what real nutrition is that providing him? So as a 70-year-old diabetic man on 4 anti-diabetic medication, his trajectory for the next decade or two with his diabetes is not going to fundamentally change unless we can change his food. So as the conversation went, we discussed how he can eat fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, all these beautiful, food that nature provides us. And he laughed and he said to me, I'll eat it if you cook it for me. So, I'll always give him the credit to inspiring me to literally think about, okay, well, how can I cook this food? How can I create a Kiran Wellness food line where I can actually prepare or help help someone like him access this food that's prepared for him. So actually educating and empowering him, so not just give him a ready-made solution, but with each meal educating him as to why that particular ingredient, that particular fruit or vegetable or whole grain or nuts or legumes are good for him, and essentially one day get him to feel confident enough to prepare that food for himself, because ultimately we all need to know how to feed ourselves healthy, good, nutritious food. So the Kiran Wellness, your Lifescript food is hopefully going to be prepared and be delivered to clients as one of our product offerings, which is very exciting. So coming back to that point, whole foods, the closer it is to the way nature makes it, the better. So I think that is a very simple concept to understand. So that is the first and foremost concept of our Lifescript nutrition or food philosophy, and you can really not go too wrong with it. Today I was talking to a patient who's got quite a sweet tooth and she likes to snack. I said, well, snack on something whole food. It's the mango season. we're lucky in Australia, Queensland, we get good mangoes in the summers. We're in the summers, as you know, in the southern hemisphere. And I said, well, you can't go too wrong with eating a mango, even if you eat too much, as long as you're not eating a processed mango ice cream, you're not eating, a mango juice from a bottle, which has got lots of other preservatives and chemicals. If you're eating a whole mango, go ahead and eat a mango. So, this is a concept that's easy to understand. And what was so inspiring is that she said to me, I'm going to give this to my granddaughter because she's putting on weight as well and I feel bad. And, that's the thing with good food, you can share it with others. And I'll often say is you serve the food that is good for you to your friends. So, being near Christmas, my pantry doesn't have any food that I don't eat. And then I try to serve the same to my guests, so I'll cut up some fruit or have a few nuts and have, a nice herbal tea or what have you. So it's about enjoying whole foods. So that's concept number one. The second one is very close to my heart because this is something I've struggled with through my, relationship with food. I have my weight's always fluctuated. I think I'm an emotional eater, if that's a category. But we in the modern world, because we're so abundant, we have a very different relationship to food than what we had, 40 years ago. So as a child, I can remember food was about, routine and discipline and actually for hunger. We were actually hungry by the time dinner was served because there was no snacking, and we would have run around in the park with other kids climbing trees and doing all of that for a couple of hours after school and all of that. So, hunger was a real thing. I mean, I say that with a sense of, how far we've come. Now we just don't allow ourselves to get hungry enough because there's always access to food. There's always food either physically near us or the idea of food, it's the imagery around us. It's just, it's quite mind-boggling because I never realized that till I traveled on my sabbatical and when I finished a lifestyle retreat in Miami, Florida, called Pritikin, where their food philosophy is very clean, whole foods, without salt, sugar, and fat. So I left Miami and I flew to California to another program called New Start in the Weimar Institute. And the journey, because I was so motivated by what I'd learned in Pritikin, and I had to catch a flight from Miami to Sacramento in California. And I realized how much food advertising is around us. It's almost like even if you don't want to eat, within 10 to 15 minutes, the imagery around you, everything around you will make you think about food or think, oh, should I get something just in case I'm hungry? Will I get something on the flight? Will I, it was such an interesting realization how much you couldn't walk more than 5 meters or 10 meters at an airport without a food outlet being in your face. So, and a lot of that is food that, will want you to eat more. And it's food that's not necessarily healthy for you. So it was a very interesting trip. And what I learned is that as I was coming out of a lifestyle retreat program, very inspired by what I'd learned, by the food I'd eaten, I ate food with no salt, and actually in 3 days my taste buds had changed, and I actually didn't need salt when, I thought, how can I eat this food? It's so bland. So it's amazing how our body adapts as well. And that journey was very interesting, because access to the food that we should be eating is difficult. It's not simple, and especially in our country here in Australia, in America, and the healthy food options can be quite confusing. And so anyway, eventually I picked up a salad which had spinach and some nuts and some feta, I think, I'm not sure, and some cranberries. Now, I could literally, from my new found knowledge at the lifestyle retreat, could see what was missing, what could be improved in that food, but it was very, very difficult to access that. And if you looked at that salad, if I did pour all the cheese that was available to me, it wouldn't be a low calorie meal in any way. And if I added the walnuts, which are good for you, but the walnuts were caramelized with tons of sugar and probably fried in some kind of fat, they weren't good for you, even though they were nuts. So I guess, without sounding super cynical, it's the dressing of these whole foods that make a difference, and that is another very important concept. But coming back to point 2, is our relationship to food. How often do we seek food? How much food is around us in our conscious space, physically? So that's the concept of our relationship to food, our access to food, the advertising around food, our dependence on food. So the psychology of food, I call it, not the philosophy, the psychology. So that's the second point. And we dig deep into that, when we talk about our food philosophy and how you eat. So although it's more in the emotional, medicine side of my Lifescript wheel, it's still a very important concept. So that's the concept of our food psychology. The third concept, like I said, is how we dress our food. So yes, we can have the finest ingredients, we can have, brown rice and vegetables and perhaps a nice piece of fish, but then what do we do with it? How do we cook it? How do we corrupt it? Do we eat it in a very simple, honest form, or do we put like the caramelized fried walnuts in my salad, or do we put it as is? We just put walnuts in the salad. So what we do with our food, how we prepare it, is a very, very important thing. So the same ingredients can produce a good meal that is good for you, or can prepare a bad meal that is not good for you. So if it's loaded with sugar and salt and fat, then the same meal becomes unhealthy for you. It's going to give you 2-3 times as much calories. It's going to inflame your gut. It's going to increase your risk of diabetes, heart disease, rather than not. So the importance of actually treating and cooking your food with respect and honesty without adding lots of ingredients is a very, very important concept. And I talk about this as, how do you dress your food? How do you then create it? And if you look at it, how we prepared food, in the past it was more home cooked, more done as an enjoyable activity, perhaps, not at the end of the day or the beginning of the day when everybody's time poor and you're trying to cook as fast and as you can, if you're cooking at all, or you're just pressing a few buttons on your phone and letting someone else do the cooking for you. So all of those ways we've lost that touch or control over not just the ingredients, but how the food is prepared, how the ingredients are dressed. So one of my patients was saying, "Yes, Dr. Sonu, I'm eating all the vegetables," but she was putting a ton of sauce in it. She was putting ketchup to make it tasty because she's still addicted to the salt and things. She was putting tons of soy sauce in the vegetables. So even though she was trying to do the right thing, her ingredients were right. It's all the dressing, all the way she was preparing that meal that kind of took away the advantages she would have had if she left or was able to cook it in its honest form. And one of the problems, like I said, is when patients talk to me, like my diabetic patient, that he's just, you know, either it's resources, it's time, lack of knowledge. A lot of the younger generation actually has no idea how to cut a pumpkin, let alone cook it. Uh, so those basic life skills of what do we do with ingredients, how we combine them, how we make them flavorsome without having to add too many nasties, is being lost. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about is teaching people how to cook, how to respect ingredients. I even say you need to uh, be mindful of how you even cut up, the vegetables. If they're the same size, what needs what length of cooking, how do you put it together? I learned it intuitively growing up because everybody needed to learn how to cook. And if you were a woman, you really needed to learn how to cook. And it was one of those essential life skills you were told you need to have to raise a family and bring up children and, keep your husband happy. So it was just how, traditionally I grew up in a household where cooking and learning to cook was not a luxury or an option. It was something you were always meant to know how to do. So, which now I feel grateful for because if there are three ingredients in the fridge, I could probably cook up a meal. And there is something to be said about being able to cook and then enjoy that meal because the respect you have for that food is a lot greater. You've spent effort in cooking it and you've got so much value and it's likely to nurture you. My mum used to say food has the taste of the quality of emotions you have while you're cooking. So I can't really say if there is a very angry kitchen and the chefs are shouting whether they'll cook a nice meal. But that's another whole topic on food psychology. So that is, I think, the third concept is how we dress our food. What do we put in it? And the three key ingredients that we need to be very mindful of is what we put as an added salt, added sugar, and added fat. All of those three things make food very, very different in its value to our body, and also it increases the harm that it can do to our body. So even though the ingredients may be the same, it's the cooking method and the added things. So to recap, what we've talked about, our food philosophy is essentially whole foods. That's the number one. So if you're eating foods in the form that nature makes them, closest to that form, the better it is. The second is your food psychology. How do you seek food? What's your relationship to food? What's around you? What you've been doing? What's your weak points? And the third philosophy is how you dress the food, how you're cooking, how much salt, sugar, fat you're adding. And that can change the whole meal. You can have the same ingredients, but it can do two different things to your body. That will bring us to the last two concepts of our food philosophy, which is the amount of food you eat. So the portions, in Ayurveda it's called matra, which is the quantity of food. And the fifth one is how often do you eat, and the fasting, and that's a buzzword now. Everybody talks about fasting. I think it's like yoga, everybody knows about it or heard about it, but then again, they're confused. The fourth concept I want to talk about is the amount of food we eat, So yes, we can have whole foods, we can cook it nicely, we can eat when we're hungry, but we can also, go wrong if we don't know how much we're eating. What's the right amount of food to eat? And everybody is different, and it changes. Your appetite changes according to for women, when they're in their menstrual cycles, they can have an increased appetite in certain times of their menstrual cycle, etc. If you're going through some physical diseases or symptoms. But essentially, we sometimes have stopped listening to the cues of when we're hungry, and we're not eating mindfully. So when we're eating or our food, we're not present. We're not actually thinking what we're eating, and are we really hungry. So we kind of eat mechanically, or in front of a TV, or while on our computers or on our phones. So we lose the cues that our body has inbuilt into telling us how much food we need. And it's amazing how clever our body is, or is designed anyway, and we then abuse it, and we lose some of the cleverness is a word. Well, anyway, it loses its ability to give us cues, because we've kind of ignored it. We haven't respected it. So this is a very, very important concept. Why do we work? Why do we earn money? So that we can not go hungry, or why did the ancient man hunt? So that they could eat. So, we've totally lost the whole the purpose, I guess, is the right word. We keep saying, oh, we're too busy to cook, we're too busy to sort this out. I get home and I've just got to get whatever. And we forget that food is our lifeline. Food is what makes or determines our health long term. Food is what is converted into our cells. So if food is the most important thing for our health and well-being, and very few people can really argue on that, why is it that it is sometimes the last in our priority of activities? And I say to my patients, now I'm in the front of the queue in my life. It's a concept I've learned the hard way in my lifetime. So food has to be the front runner in our priority. And it's easier said than done. And I can sit here and talk to you about this, but as a busy professional, I've been guilty of this a long time, and now I think things have to change. And life teaches, as you get older, you're in your 40s, 50s, you suddenly realize, your body is going to tell you it's not happy if you continue to not take care of it. So I guess the thing I'm saying to you, although I started talking about the amount of food, what really I'm saying is that amount is determined by our body's cues to how much we need, when we're full, how mindfully we're eating, and what else, is going on while we're consuming food. So, you can eat a whole packet of chips while watching a movie, and you would not even, consider how much you're eating. Do you need that? You've just lost the whole, the whole cue system. So the portions of food is really, really important. And the portions that we are served, if you look at what the size of a hamburger used to be. That's probably not a good analogy. I don't think I would want you to eat any size hamburgers. But it's changed. Our serving sizes have changed when we eat out. Sometimes, you get served a main meal you think should be fit enough for 4 people. You don't know whether they brought it out for you or it's just for the whole table. So we really lost our cues. We're distracted. We're not mindfully eating. Food is put out to us in a bigger portion, and we, some of us have grown in that era where you didn't waste food. You just feel like you've got to finish everything on your plate. So the quantity, the amount of food we're eating has changed considerably. And these are all the things that we go through as we go through the retreats and the programs and the online programs that we will be, talking about. So when we put out our food, we'll be say, right, when you eat this food, you need to look at it, enjoy the colors, enjoy those little evenness of the vegetables. They cut all to even size or the right shape, smell your food, and put your fork or knife or spoon down every so often to actually reflect, is this good, is it not good, how do you feel? So just having those moments of pause, because your body will then be able to tell you, I'm full, I don't need more. And you will realize how much you then control the amount of food you eat. So the same thing, if you eat twice what you need to eat, you're going to be twice the size. It's just as simple as that. And when you cook food, like I said in my earlier philosophy, with a lot of salt and sugar and fat, it is addictive. The most addictive food is breast milk. So, babies like it so much, and it's always the right amount of sugar and fat in that. And so when we bake cakes, sugar and fat, perfect combination. So again, it's that sort of addictive nature of food where we lose that hunger cues, and we're eating more for our minds than our stomach and our body. So the amount of food, if you look at the concepts, the stomach is a bag. It's got stretch receptors. If you keep filling it with more and more and more food all the time, it'll just assume that that's your normal portion. So it'll need more food to feel fuller. So, the whole concept, when we think about bariatric surgery these days, we chop a part of the stomach, we shrink that. A lot of other biochemical and, metabolic things happen as well as part of that. But essentially, we, shrink the stomach, which you can do naturally when you start to eat the right amount of food over a period of time. And the bodies are just so amazing, they adapt. You abuse it, but then you get back on track, it also heals. And that's something, I have the privilege to observe and see in my practice, where people have done, they've abused their bodies, or they've eaten the wrong things, but when they start eating the right things as well, and they start changing, they feel incredible. Like today, I saw someone who started to drink 3 liters of water, just like I told her. And she said, oh my God, it is so good. My skin is shining. And she was literally glowing. And a simple step as drinking more water. And so, our bodies are so receptive to good change, just like it is to bad change. And it rewards us. So when we start to look at our quantities, and we start to eat the right quantities, and we start to be more mindful of what we're eating, then our body starts to have that feedback loop. It'll tell us, and it'll tell us that you're eating the wrong foods too. So if you continue to eat the right foods, and then one day you have this cheat day, although I don't like that word at all, because who are you cheating? You don't cheat yourself, your body. But let's say you have a day where you kind of go slightly away from your, normal food patterns. Your body will tell you as well. It won't like the food that, that's processed or fried and all of that. It'll tell you, it won't react very well. Or if you overeat, it will tell you as well. So the body is like a beautiful piece of, it's a beautiful creation with so much intelligence, far beyond our imagination. We've come so far in technology and that, but if we look at what is in there, in our gut, in our brain, I think science has got still a long way to catch up. But before divulging, I'll do a podcast on the mind-body connection and some very interesting facts I'd like to bring to you, and how that relates to your life script. But for here and now, coming back to the food philosophy, it's the portion, the matra of food. So if you look at stomach as a bag, or you look at stomach as a food processor, you never fill it to the brim, do you? You leave some room for it to churn and process and all of that. So essentially, if you think 2/3 is the maximum you should ever fill your stomach. So there should be that room that you could eat a bit more, but you leave it at that. And when people practice that on a regular basis, they maintain good health. So there is that little room for extra, but I think you've just had enough. So there's a hunger scale we follow. So in our retreats, we'll have them on our dining tables, and we'll put them out with our, our Lifescript food as well, which you can, before you eat, you can actually have a look and say, where are you in your hunger scale? Are you so hungry that you can eat anything, or you're just hungry, ready to eat or not? And we want to be in the middle portion. We don't want to be too starved, and we don't want to be not that hungry at all. So there's a hunger scale that we will share with you, which is an important thing. And that will determine then the amount of food. And we eat with our eyes, we eat with our senses, we eat with people, and all of that has an impact on how much we eat. So think of your stomachs as a food processor. You don't fill it to the brim, about 2/3, and if you're mindful, your body will tell you when to stop. So that's the fourth concept, is the amount of food. The final concept is the timing, and how often do you eat? And that kind of goes to, my point of the food psychology as well, because we're so bombarded with food and the thought of food and the overwhelming, obsession with what we should or shouldn't eat, and weight gain or weight loss. And, we're a very, very society where the way we look has become more important than the way we feel. And that goes with food as well. So we've become a bit imbalanced, I feel, with regards to how often we need to eat. And I think some of it has come from what we've been taught, 3 meals a day or snacks in the middle. But do we really need to eat that often? Very few people actually do well with eating that way. Certain people who've got very fast metabolisms, and they really struggle to keep that up, and they probably may need to eat more frequent meals. But majority of us don't need to eat that often. There's lots of studies that proven that 2 main meals is probably enough. And like anything, any system of our body, we've got to let it rest and reboot. And fasting has become a fad. There's a million fasting diets and fasting apps and all of that. We tend to take everything these days and take it to the extreme. We never talk about mediocrity or just keeping it simple and just that. We never have anything at face value anymore. So we're always like running with this. One time I was doing a radio interview, and I do every fortnight a chat with Sophie Formica on 4BC, and I love that, that time. And one time I was asked, so Dr. Sonu, if there's one vegetable you could eat to save your life, which one would that be? And I just thought, the question is wrong. Why would you only eat one vegetable? I said, well, there isn't that. I can't answer that. So, but we love this. We love the drama of everything, So if I could quote one vegetable, that could be the headlines. That could, this is the vegetable now. So then the broccoli will go out of stock at Woolworths, or just like we ran out of stuff during COVID. So we want that magic, headlines, a magic thing. This is what you do. So essentially, the simple concept is we don't need to eat as often as we think. We don't need to be surrounded by the thought of food all the time or what we're going to eat. We've got to understand that food is to sustain our body. It's not always something that you should seek immense pleasure from, although, I have no doubt that food is pleasurable. And I grew up in India, and with Indians, we're foodies by genetic makeup. But what I'm trying to say is that food is a means of sustenance as well. It's not just all about feeding our taste buds and feeding our emotional hunger and feeding our social norms. Yeah, so sometimes you can have a friend over after dinner and you don't have to eat anything or drink anything, so that is really important. That's we just gotta zip sometimes, It's, kitchen is closed, and our stomach is rebooting, our gut is rebooting, our whole body is rebooting. We don't need to put food in all the time for whatever reasons I've just mentioned. And that essentially is the concept of fasting. And if you look at cultures, traditions, everywhere in the world, they knew what to do. They knew that, like, for example, my friend was saying in the Chinese culture, they have a big feast, and the day after, they don't eat the day after. They have a very small meal. The way they planned their menus and their recipes was like that, during the day. Fasting periods in a calendar, whether that was for religious purposes. So human beings as a civilization knew that fasting was important, and we never needed apps for that. But now it's become more complicated. So my take-home message to you would be that there are moments where we don't need to eat, and we really need to realign with our mental well-being as well. What is our relationship to food, and how do we feel about not having access to food for 24 hours, and that for me was the biggest lesson when I actually went through a 72-hour fast in California at the Weimar Institute. And although it panicked and scared me initially, it was a very life-changing moment for me, because I realized my internal, my makeup, my relationship to food, and what that meant to be on a kind of a water or no food fast for 72 hours. So I think, simply put, not eating all the time or having a break and fasting every so often is essential for our bodies. How you do it, what pattern you do it, what works for you, whether skipping breakfast works for you, or there can be a million ways to do it. But the essential point is you cannot eat 3 to 6 meals a day, every day, 365 days, and stay healthy. So there has to be some form of, balancing or rebooting act. But we'll talk about the 72-hour fast, because that's part of our Cure and Wellness Retreat program. I'll talk to you more about that. What's the evidence, how we do it, how safe it is, what actually happens in the body when you do that. And that would be something exciting to talk about. So this is your Lifescript podcast, and today it was my pleasure to talk about the food philosophy of your Lifescript. And the food philosophy is talking about eating whole foods, being mindful or understanding the psychology of food, dressing food with respect, so no added salt, sugar, or fat, amount of food you eat, and being mindful again, because everything comes from the top seat of the brain, and fasting, which is like a reboot. Everything needs a reboot, including your computer and your body and everything. So again, fasting and how you do it is really important. So essentially, that is the food philosophy of your Lifescript. That's what I've learned from my research and travels around the world, my 25 years of career. And I can't feel more honest about this, because that's what I've incorporated into my life, and finally understood my own food psychology and philosophy and what will sustain me long term. So this is Dr. Sonu signing off, and this is your Lifescript Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the Lifescript Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. The show notes and any resources mentioned can be found in the accompanying blog post on my website. Please remember that the information provided in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or provide medical advice for any health conditions. If you're looking for individualized support, please head over to my website, drsonu.com.au. That's drsonu.com.au to learn more about how Kirin Wellness and its programs can help you on your health and healing journey.